there was a moment where I understood fluid dynamics in a completely new way. Now, I'm not a physicist. I'm not any kind of science educator. Just a layman. But there was an interesting moment, and it's just one of those things. It's like all things that once understood, it seems obvious. It seems obvious. It seems like, well, everyone knows this, and because it just makes sense. So my statement is lift is as much about the low pressure that's pulling you towards somewhere as it is about the high pressure which is pushing you towards somewhere. Now, there's a couple of ways that how did I discover this? How did I discover this for myself? How did I see it in practical application myself? And how can you see it yourself? Go into a body of water, whether it be a pool is good because there won't be as many currents. There'll be less external variables. If you go in the ocean, there'll be some more external variables playing on you. But if you're in a pool, the water will be, by definition, relatively stagnant. And what you want to do is just stand in a part of the pool and then move yourself, and you not by doing the whole swim, but just stand in one location and push yourself with your hands. And traditionally, you'd think that the way you're pushing yourself is you're pushing against the water and pushing yourself forward, which you are. But that's only half of it. The other half of it is that by doing that motion, you're creating a low pressure in front of you that is going to suck you into that new low pressure which you just created. And by standing still in a still part of water, you can experience this. You can feel the pulling motion. You feel the pushing motion, directly on your hands, but you feel the pulling motion from this little center of air or center of water, this low pressure of water which you just created in front of yourself. And this, when you actually get to feel that force, you then start to understand how things like airplanes can remain in the sky, how, helicopters and airplanes how there is, whether it's but definitely an airplane engine, a helicopter rotor, an airplane wing. Now, airplane wings are interesting. So but definitely what an airplane engine, whether it's a jet engine or propeller engine, anything where you're having this low pressure effect. This low pressure effect. And so what is being created, and you can almost call engines, really high speed scavengers. If you look at the front of an engine and the front of one of those tunneling machines and kind of how they operate, there's a lot of similarities. Mainly there's a large rotating mass that is permeating, puncturing through whatever medium it's supposed to be puncturing through. If it's a tunneling machine, then it's going through dirt and earth, and if it's an aircraft engine, it's going through air. And also, if it's a boat engines are another one. So, rotors, whether they're on, whether any of these kinds of things that are moving through a fluid, one of the most important, it's at least half of the force, is creating the low pressure in front of the object. So if you think of an aircraft engine, everybody already knows the high pressure behind the engine. There's all those things where they're pushing over buses and vehicles with the aircraft engine, but there's what you're not seeing is, and I guess you see it when like a bird or something goes through the front of the engine, but it's that low pressure in front of an engine. It's essentially the push and pull. It's, if you imagine a long rope, going through the center of the engine, there's that pull and push, and that pulling effect, how it pulls it through the air, is very interesting, and you can actually feel the strength of the effect in the pull doing what I said. So thinking about that gives you a whole new perspective on, if you were to think about engine design and engine engineering, and especially the aeronautic force, because you think about, as a wing is going over, the whole point is that it's creating a high pressure below and a low pressure above. And the high pressure below makes sense because you think, oh, it's pushing it up, but it's also getting sucked up, which is even cooler, because it's creating that low pressure. So the plane is literally being sucked, it's being sucked and pulled up into the air. A submarine is sucking and pulling itself through the water, as is an aircraft engine and anything else. So I didn't know what to really do with this information. It's just something cool to try. So if you're in a pool, you can actually try it out, because if you've never thought of it like that, it could be hard to think about, unless you're already a physics professor or something like that, or you're, in doing any kind of engineering, fluid dynamic engineering. This would be an important thing to know. But there's one thing to know it, and then another thing to be able to experience it. So give that a try. This is your thing to try out for today, and it will illustrate for you how fluid dynamics work, how low pressure and high pressure work in tandem to help move you forward. And what you can actually see, how you can optimize your efficiency when you're moving in that way. You can actually see that if you scoop from the very middle right in front of you, you'll get more of a low pressure effect than if you start your scoop, to the sides of you. And that would be a good experience. This is, I'm speaking anecdotally, but that would be a good experiment to see by how much and what it is. That if you, and you'd probably not want to do it with a person, you'd want some machine that could just replicate the movement, and then it sees how much it pushes itself forward, as opposed to being outside. So instead of creating a low pressure in front of it, it's creating a low pressure on the side of it, which doesn't generate as much of a moving effect. So it's very interesting how that works, and it makes you think of things like, an aircraft. It has that effect on the sides. The engines are pushing the whole thing forward, but there's no low pressure effect being created at the front of the plane. The main mass of the plane, there's no low pressure effect. Now, what that would, for it to have that, you would need some kind of either air intake or something on the front of it, which created this low pressure that was in front of the aircraft, which could make it move. It's kind of like the effect that you get when you're behind a jet stream. So you have a high pressure behind you and a low pressure in front of you, because the whole air is moving along with it. So it's not just the air that's pushing behind you, but there's a lack of air in front of you that's then moving, helping move you forward, just by the stabilizing effect of the universe. So there's a lot of things to think about when you think of that other side. And when you think about rockets, because rockets, there's definitely a net pressure effect, because there's a lot of high pressure at the bottom, and then to be able to fill up those air cavities, it's probably taking air from the surrounding area, thus creating that low pressure bubble on the top. But how could you maximize these low pressure bubbles, which have to develop because in front of objects that have to move through either air or water, which is, every moving thing that we have to deal with. Anything, if it could be benefited by creating a low pressure bubble in front of it, at least for speed and efficiency and acceleration, could advance it. And I wonder if there's things Like if you put air scoops on the bottom of planes so that we're having a net negative airflow where there's now it's creating I don't know these are the questions, but that is something to think about. So I don't really know where else to go with this video. I hope you found it interesting. I thought of it and I thought, well, this is something that I should put on YouTube, and let's see. So if you have any thoughts about this, I just found it interesting. If you've actually worked with this principle, leave a comment down below. If you're a better YouTube creator than I am, go and do the experiment. That would be interesting to see. And thanks for watching.